Hi, I'm Ruddock, Content Editor at SVG Europe, and I'm here with Mathieu Yerle, Senior Vice President of Strategy, Product and Marketing at Chyron. So Mathieu, the name Chyron is strongly associated with live-to-air graphics, but how has the company expanded to other areas of live production?
You're completely right. So for sure, Chyron has always been associated with graphic, and in fact, we pioneered graphics in the late 60s, really, when the company was founded, and since then, graphics have always been at the very core of everything we do, and that still is the case today. So a lot of our focus is still very much on graphics. Now, from the graphics workflow we know and have built over the years, we've clearly extended the scope of the solution we offer to, I would say, adjacent verticals. Whether it is on the audio video mixing and switching side, which is also now part of the main core graphic engine we have for Prime, to newsroom workflow, integrating the newsroom system through our Cameo asset management platform, for instance, or running live tickers on there. There is always a graphic component of the workflow, but it's definitely been expanded beyond. More recently, in fact, at NAB last year, we launched a new cloud-based live production platform called Chyron Live that also runs the core of the Prime graphic, but also covers a much wider scope, including, again, audio video mixing, of course, graphics, but also replay and illustration, ultimately down to live streaming on social media, CMS and OTT platforms as well.
Okay, and traditional workflows depend on dedicated hardware for specific tasks with dedicated operators. How do you see this changing now and into the future?
It's definitely a good assessment. I mean, we've seen a lot of solutions, starting on hardware components, just like we did. Now, as a company, we've clearly evolved beyond hardware and definitely are a lot more centered on everything software, and it's been the case for the last 10 years now. There is another transition happening for us at the moment, which is more in the realm of moving from a software company to a platform company, in the sense that we want to be aggregating all of our IP, all of the workflow that we can cover through all those different software into one comprehensive or a few sets of platforms that are either cloud-based, cloud run, or running in a hybrid model where part of the workflow are still running on premises because it makes sense, typically in a local news station, but also a part of the workflow being run either remotely or typically from a cloud environment. So I think clearly our industry overall, and I think also Chyron more specifically, has clearly adopted all those latest technologies, whether cloud or hybrid models, and we are using that a lot more. So I think this is clearly a trend that we're seeing a lot of our customers also moving to. We're not, to be completely honest, we're not pushing extremely for everything cloud. I mean, there are functions that do not make sense to move into the cloud yet. So we understand that, and we try to really provide, the best that all our customers would benefit from. So at times, again, it requires us to have components that would run on premises, whether for disaster recovery scenario, whether it is because it needs to integrate with components that are on premises, running on hardware or not, or virtualized. But also we're trying at the same time to promote the idea that a lot of the processing, a lot of the centralization, remote access is clearly facilitated by technologies like clouds or virtualization for that matter. So we are fully on board on that train, but really trying to cater for essentially what our customers ask us.
Okay, and just talking about cloud there, why do you see cloud production as especially important for live sports broadcasting?
I think it is definitely a business enabler in many ways. Again, the sports market is a very interesting example of the point we just made, that started and has been operated for decades, on premises, leveraging hardware components, and essentially solutions were crafted by combining different functions and integrating hardware boxes together to cover an entire scope. We still see a lot of that today, and there is nothing really wrong about it. However, it has a number of constraints. First of all, customers need to invest in a lot of equipment up front. They need to assemble, they need to cover integration of system, which is not always easy. especially when working with multiple vendors. And I think cloud changes the game. I think there might still be integration points, but it's much easier to do there. A lot of the vendors that work in cloud also have adopted standard technologies, whether protocols or API layers that makes the integration much faster and simpler. But for companies like Chyron as well, it's clear that it enables clients to operate a lot more of our offerings on one central place. So the example that I shared earlier, for example, with Chyron Live, we essentially took the concept and the workflow that we traditionally were providing through three different software or hardware components, and all of that has been now combined into a cloud offering that customers can use on demand and pay by the production hour. So in some ways, it's a little bit of a revolution as to the business enablement that creates, from operating entire remote crews that, again, do not need to be sitting next to each other anymore, to aggregating the workloads and workflow into one single place. So really changing the game in that respect, and clearly the sports vertical is where we are definitely reaping the benefits of that cloud technology today. And we also, seeing that other verticals are following that trend. In the news market, there's more component of the news workflow moving to the cloud. We have launched already some news channels that are entirely cloud run and cloud based today. So we are beyond the proof of concept stages. That technology has been proven. We and other vendors in the space are fully committed to that, and clearly it allows a level of flexibility for all clients that's unheard of. So clearly a game changer in many regards.
And what about the challenges when it comes to cloud production, and what are they and how can they be overcome?
There are definitely challenges that come with that, that kind of transition for sure. There are different challenges than what we've known previously or that we know today still on-prem deployments. One that I usually refer to is, and especially when we work with people that have a strong broadcast experience, and I've actually seen broadcast workflow being constructed over the last few decades. Usually the starting point of the conversation is, well, how do I connect that from some equipment that I still have on premises, right? And so we are partnering with a number of vendors or partner of ours that facilitate typically the transport encoders, and so that they connect to physical cameras in studios at the venues in a spot workflow and transmit that over to the cloud. And from then on, it becomes pretty much a walk in the park, given everything else runs in the cloud. So clearly the challenge of transporting from ground to cloud, or the other way around, from cloud back to ground, sometimes is one challenge that needs to be thought through. There are many solutions to address that today. We've seen the emergence of protocols that facilitate that make those transfer reliable and secure. On our side recently with Chyron Live again, we've invested a lot on the SRT protocol, for instance. That is a perfect example of how this can be achieved securely and with a very low latency as well. I think the other challenge is more of an operational challenge. The cloud overall changes the game, as I said earlier, in the way teams work together. You don't need necessarily to have a crew in a truck anymore. To give you the example of a sports production, typically we have done a lot of productions with entire remote crew where the producer might be sitting in New York. You might have field operators at a stadium in Miami, and you might have a graphic editor in another city in the country, right? And so that kind of collaboration has been enabled, but brings challenge. How do you communicate in that type of scenario? How do you make sure that the work gets done just like it would be done by people sitting right next to each other? So it has really required all of us vendors to think through, the usability, the way for people to communicate through those tools. So integrating, technology where typically intercom type, where people can talk to each other during the production while not necessarily being physically right next to another, is very critical and important. But also it creates a lot of opportunities, for our clients, for service providers to become contributors to those kind of production, which was a little bit more complex, previously. So clearly we're seeing these challenges. I think there are definitely challenges that can be addressed, that are already been addressed on the number of productions. It's just a mind shift. And I think, we've seen our client being very successful as long as there is some obviously planning required. I mean, you don't, move an entire production workflow to the cloud just like that. There is operational thoughts that need to happen in order to craft a workflow that is also adapted to that. But clearly, the benefits clearly are making this very worth it compared to the challenges.